That music was brought to you and played by Steve Miller, my brother-in-law, and produced by Lainey Miller, my niece. Well, welcome to the next episode of Outside Insights podcast. It's a community designed to help individuals bridge the gaps in their personal and professional lives and help folks achieve their desired goals. I'm your host, Chris Burkhard. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Steven Pivnik to the show. Welcome, Steven.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you. Steven is a former founder and CEO of an international technology company. What's kind of fun, as we were having some preliminary dialogue about this and other things, I found out by accident I was a service provider to that business, which just makes the world small because we're a couple states away from each other as it is. Steven grew that business to 12 countries, 200 employees. Had a very successful exit from that business, and now he's a sought-after advisor, and folks use his experience and unique insights to help other entrepreneurs navigate their way to success. That's a big deal. We also share something in common, although I think he's a better athlete than me. Things like Ironman distance, triathlons, marathons, ultra marathons. I did just walk the Appalachian Trail in North Georgia, and that kicked my butt. So that's probably enough. But it's really a pleasure to have you on the show. And really, I'll go with a two-part kind of question. I find that people really want to know how you built your company, how you did it. This is always really of interest to people. But in your story, you're up to a bunch of stuff today that gives you energy and passion. So I'll give you a lot of room to kind of work those two things out.
Sure. Yeah. So, on the business front, it's an overused statement, but I wholeheartedly believe in it. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Sure, we got a lot of lucky breaks, from the early days. I started the company primarily as a consulting services organization. And then slowly but surely, it turned into a software company based on a custom project that we were doing for a customer. But we worked from some, crazy hours. I had a, crazy work ethic instilled in me from my immigrant parents. And again, the harder we worked, the luckier we got. We built it into a, sizable software and professional services company, like you mentioned, that grew to over 200 employees across 12 countries. So that was incredibly exciting. That entire journey was really exciting. Later on in my life, as you mentioned also, I got into endurance sports. And I found that to be fascinating as well. So it took me up until I was 40 years old to realize that I've got some really bad genes inside of here between my grandparents, my parents, and other family members. There's some bad stuff brewing. So I better get into some good shape in order to fight it if and when it comes. So I took on endurance sports, triathlons, ultramarathons, mountaineering, etc. And as I started competing and going down, that journey, I found that there's a lot of similarities, between building and running a company to endurance sports. All the planning, the preparation, the execution, the perseverance, the pivots, the setbacks, you name it, the list of similarities goes on and on and on. So that's a really long answer to what's exciting me today is a book project that I'm working on, which compares and contrasts building a business to endurance sports. All the similarities, all the challenges. And I'm writing it with the hope to really motivate others to take on both journeys. I've learned a lot about myself while participating in endurance events. I've learned a lot about myself while, building and later selling a company. And I just want to pass on, I've documented, and I want to pass on all of those, lessons learned, tips and tricks, some of the things, that the to-dos and the not to-dos on both fronts. So I'm super excited right now. I'm putting the finishing touches on the manuscript as we speak, and then it should hit the publishing phase and will be released at the beginning of next year. So that's super exciting for me right now.
Do you have a title picked out yet, or is that a secret for now?
No, I'm surprised that we picked out a title at the very beginning of the manuscript process, and it has withstood the test of time. It's called Built to Finish.
Well, it's a great title. So It's interesting to hear. I always said folks would say business is a sprint, a series of sprints, and it can be when it comes to finishing projects and software and those things. but I've always felt that business is a marathon is a better fitting statement because of the nature of the business. So I think it fits. One of the things I'm thinking about is business is an outlet for the mind.
Sure.
Was the physical to challenge your body in the same way that you challenged your mind in business? What was the trigger to get in? You said genetics. I get it. Unfortunately, I think most of us have a track record of genetics, but
Yeah.
was it some life event where, you just felt like you had to do something other than business with the training?
I mean, my business was, firing on all cylinders. It was really going well. I've always appreciated a good challenge. And it was interesting that actually at work, somebody at a dinner party hosted by one of my executives, another executive came to me and said, "Rita just finished a triathlon last weekend." And Rita was one of our employees, one of our project managers. And I mean, not that she looked unhealthy in any way, shape, or form, but she was just an average human. Athletic human in my mind. And at that point, this is part of my ignorance. I'm like, I thought a triathlon was an Olympic event. How does a mere mortal do a triathlon? So I was really intrigued by this. So I spoke with her on Monday morning, and she's like, "Oh, there's this website called beginnertriathlete.com. You find a local race and you sign up." I'm like, "Just anybody can sign up?" She's like, "Anybody can sign up." So that a huge, light bulb went off in my mind. I'm like, I'm going to turn 40 and I'm going to become a triathlete. And so I took on that challenge. That was, I learned this about maybe 4 or 5 months prior to my 40th birthday. So I trained and I trained and I trained. I was really a poor swimmer. Not that I became a great swimmer, but I became a good enough swimmer to finish the 800-meter distance or whatever that sprint distance triathlon was. I mean, I knew how to ride a bike. It was only going to be a 12-mile bike portion of that race. And I figured I could just speed walk the run portion, which was only
Sure.
5K. So I turned 40. And then the weekend after, I became a triathlete, which was just, in my mind, a huge accomplishment. And then I thanked her for the recommendation and the encouragement, like to get me into this. And she responded, "Well, we'll see you in Kona one day." And I had no idea what that meant. So I Googled Kona and triathlete, and I find out about this thing called Ironman. And that's when that really, really high goal was set. I'm like, not only now that I'm a triathlete, I'm going to compete in the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. So that's how this entire Michigaz, as they say in my country, was born.
And are you on that journey?
I'm happy to say that I've completed that journey. So it took forever. Most people qualify for the World Championship by being the best in their age group.
Sure.
My motto is not fast, not last, because I had a company to run at the time, but I did
Sure.
train enough in order to, complete an Ironman. So Ironman has a program called the Legacy Lottery Program, where it's like their frequent flyer club. You don't have to be the fastest, but as long as you do 12 full distance Ironman races, you get a lottery ticket to go to the World Championships and compete with the best in the world. So that's how I got into the World Championship last October.
So, Stephen, you'll find this interesting. My subscribers, maybe not, but a board member for Placers Cares are not for profit. His name's Martin Bronze. I don't know if you trained against him, similar ages, but it's a very good friend who qualified in Lake Placid
Okay,
and then blew a knee out, but finished in Kona anyway. And
nice.
instead of having a really good chance to, frankly, place very high, he was proud to be not first, not last, but get into
Yeah.
the middle. So was it okay? Get into the fun. Harder to do your first try or to start your business?
Oh, the business by far. I mean, in today's day and age, it's so easy, right? You can, I mean, I'm saying this a little bit, tongue in cheek. You can go to ChatGPT, get a business plan, get a staffing plan. Go on. It's not that hard to raise a little bit of, seed capital if you have an, semi decent idea, and voila, you're off to the races. When I started my company in 1993, there was no such thing. There was no internet. It was literally, I have an idea. I'm going to go and execute this idea. I had no idea on how to raise money. I was just an independent consultant trading, my time for dollars and getting paid, and slowly but surely, turn that into a business. So I mean, obviously, a lot of other things happened in between, but that by far was significantly harder to do than to train for to train for a triathlon.
As hard as it is to believe, you had to buy a physical phone system, you had to buy a physical server, you were in physical space. Today in an afternoon, between Google and a few pieces of software, SaaS, you can pretty much have connectivity set up for anything. So yeah, the barrier to entry is really kind of amazing. Now, you talked in your opening, or actually rather casually, about the conversion from being a services business, a professional services business, consulting, to having a chance, an opportunity with a customer to convert to something that was more of a managed service or a model that, a product.
Right.
Is that interesting for you to cover? Because it's interesting for
Sure.
me to hear, but it sounds like that's our everybody. I talk to a host of services businesses. That's like our Super Bowl, World Series, and World Cup rolled into one when we can convert to that.
Sure. No, I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of others. If obviously there's some really really smart people out there that are visionary and that create ideas and build software companies from the get go. Well, we didn't. We were a services company. And why do large companies hire professional services company? Typically because they want them to do something custom, for them that's unique to their requirements. In my case, the unique requirement from JP Morgan was we are running an old email system, and we are moving. At the time, there was something called Lotus Notes. Many of your listeners and viewers probably don't know what Lotus Notes is. It used to be the most popular enterprise email program in the 90s. And JP Morgan said, we want to go onto Lotus Notes, but we have all these employees that have data in other email systems. Can you please write us a utility to convert this data onto Lotus Notes so that when our employees walk in the morning, they still have their calendar, their inbox, their contacts, etc. So we looked at ourselves and said, that's probably the most boring project in the world, because we were doing cooler things at the time than writing conversion utilities. But of course, we were consultants and we wanted the revenue. We wrote that program for them. And then lo and behold, there was a massive trend that presented itself, with a whole bunch of other, like thousands of other companies adopting the same email platform and wanting to convert email data. So that was the birth of our software company, and we did that, we did that. We did it incredibly well, and we later supported the Microsoft platform. We later supported the Microsoft Cloud. So every single use case for possibly having to move email data from one place to another, including mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, etc., fueled the need for more and more software from us. So that was the genesis. And I still think there's great opportunity right now for any consulting company that's working on a custom project. Again, assuming that the company allows you to take that IP that you've built custom for them and to productize it. So there, that's a whole, rat's nest right there. But if it's allowed, there's opportunity there to create, custom work into a software product to be utilized by others.
So now I know what you meant by feeling that you were lucky, but it feels a bit like right place, right time. And then you expanded it based on a break in the marketplace.
Yeah, it definitely was right place, right time. Again, we were maniacal about customer satisfaction, so we made sure that the product, did what it was advertised to do, and it did it well, so that employees wouldn't have any issues with like the wrong data showing up. You can imagine a calendar invite being converted incorrectly, and a staff meeting that's supposed to happen at 9:00 gets moved to 10:00, and then that executive misses a meeting, and that's just one example. So we did it incredibly well, and we also we did a really good job on the marketing front as well to promote this capability that we created, so that other customers would hear about it. So it was a combination of being at the right place at the right time to get it done, and then to market it globally so that the world knows that it exists.
So there's different phases to a business. You sounds like you went through a lot of them over 20 plus years. Startup,
yes.
Getting to some fun revenues, maybe some scaling, mid-sized stuff, getting ready for sale or IPO or what have you, did you have a favorite phase? And do you focus with organizations today as a consultant based on that, or how do you feel about that question?
Yeah, my favorite phase and the one that I'm specializing in right now is really the later stage growth phase. um, that is really when I like our growth from 0 to 20 million was really challenging, really tough. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it, especially because we didn't have any outside funding at all, which is something I would not recommend. It's very uncommon in today's day and age for a company to be completely bootstrapped, but we
You and
were.
I share that, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm I'm still crazy.
There's always the exception. So that it's
Yeah.
and so you and I both prove that it is possible, but we are definitely the exceptions because very few people want to go through that, blood, sweat, and tears and heartache and sleepless nights of self funding. But yeah, so that was really interesting. But what I enjoyed significantly more was the later stage growth. And not that we, and again, we were still self-funded, but we were operating at such a higher level from a sales volume perspective. Once we hit 20, 25, 30, then 35, and then over $40 million in revenue, we had a lot more resources to play with, and to continue to ensure our continued growth. So that's the phase that I enjoy the most, and that I think I have the most lessons learned from, and that's where I'm really enjoying, helping other entrepreneurs, go through their growth phase.
It's kind of an incomplete quote, but one of my mentors says it all piles up at the end.
Sure does.
Yeah, I thought that would translate for you, but you sort of all those first 20 to get to 20 million in those years to do it. It's like all these little incremental improvements that are your strategy. But it seems like over time, if you survive all that, the deals get a little larger. And then one day they're all large,
Right.
and it makes a big difference in the business. And, I guess, would you say, Stephen, that's in essence why there's a world of mergers and acquisitions? Somebody understands the blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, time, energy, money, resources it takes to get to that spot, and they're willing to pay you for it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, an acquisition, a new direction for a company or an additive component to a company is done by doing a buy versus build analysis, right? So a company
Interesting.
XYZ says, I want to get into this space, and this space can be a new product or this space can be a new geography. Then they analyze what is it going to take to build that organically by ourselves, again, this new product or get into this new geography. And so that usually comes up, that turns into a number. And then if they're smart, they'll say, okay, who's out there already doing this? And is it going to be easier for us just to acquire that capability or that geography? So I know that a lot of, M&A decisions are based on this build versus buy decision that companies go through.
Would, you know, most workers that listen to this or are in the community, they're trying to get ahead and they're evaluating entrepreneurship, some sort of business startup. Would you support that today? Do you think it's you talked about it being easy to start, but would you start a business today?
The answer is yes. For
Yeah.
the if I wake up one morning and I just haven't really spent too much time thinking of like what do I want to do next. Right now, I've
Yeah.
already spoken. My current next project is my book.
And that's enough.
When
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking there's somebody listening. Is this boy, well, debt ceiling stuff, you got the economy maybe coming off. Is there ever a bad time not to start a business if you have a good idea?
No, I think there is always all the time is a great time to start a business. And I think with all the tools available today, anybody that has an idea can really, if they're uber aggressive about it, they can go after it in an aggressive way. If they're a little bit more cautious, it's relatively easy to test the waters. with your idea to see if there's a market for it, and to see if there's, product market fit with whatever it is you want to build, whether it's a gadget, whether it's a product, a service, a combination of some of those things. I think it's never been easier to see if there's a market fit for
Yeah.
the idea that you have. See if so when that proves positive, then you can start to scale, and you can invest some more money, some more resources, some more of your time. But I don't think it's ever been easier, and I highly encourage anybody with an entrepreneurial bug to try it.
I'm seeing a lot of incubators and beehives and colleges teach that market fit exercise to non-business majors, but teaching it in a way as an elective. And it makes so much sense, because even if you're not going to be an entrepreneur, all of us that are entrepreneurs, and frankly, most businesses today, need an entrepreneurial mindset from the workforce.
Sure.
So it's just as important whether you take the risk and invest in something yourself. If you reflect back on things, what are you best at? What have you learned about? What are you best at?
What am I best at? Personally?
Well, you can answer it any way you like. That's the
Yeah.
fun part of this.
I think I was best at promotion. I
Okay.
was so proud. I mean, fortunately, once we got bigger, I stopped coding. Thank God, I wasn't got to a point where I just wasn't allowed to code anymore. They
Uh,
they prohibited
they
me
kicked
from
you out of
getting
that, huh?
code, which
Yeah.
was a great decision that my team made. I was really really good at promotion. I was so proud of my baby, and like what we had created, and all the customer success stories, that we executed on. And I was at most trade shows and most industry events, and at trade shows that we would do, road shows for Microsoft, or previous to Microsoft, for IBM. I was front and center on stage, promoting our capabilities. And it just gave me so much pride, to get up there, whether it be in front of 10 people or, 5,000 people at a big conference, and to talk about our capabilities and how we can execute successful projects for customers. So I just loved the promotion aspect of our business. And so that was me personally. And I think as a company, we also did a really great job on the marketing front, to make it
Okay.
seem like most people were surprised when they found out we were a 200-person company. They're like, you gave off the impression of a 5,000 employee company, is what I heard very often. So I was very proud of our marketing abilities.
And that was when marketing was not easy. So that's
Yeah.
If I knew you as a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, would I have said you were going to be an entrepreneur? Did you know early on?
It's interesting. I probably not. I was a complete nerd. It comes as no surprise. My best friend was my Commodore 64 computer. I spent Fridays and Saturday nights looking at Bike magazine, and typing in programs to make little cartoon characters
Oh,
and
but
little
Stephen,
spaceships.
that was your edge. All that coding time.
That definitely gave me an edge, but I don't think no, you wouldn't have said I was going to be an entrepreneur. But it's funny. I took a class once, and I forget the actual terminology that they utilize, but there's events that happen in people's lives that kind of sort of dictate their future. I had not that I was picked on specifically, but I was the poorest kid in my class. Immigrant family, and based on an immigrant scholarship, I got into a really good school, a yeshiva in Brooklyn, New York. And one day after spring break, I came in my normal clothes, the clothes that I wore through the winter. And I guess the school quarterback, or the equivalent, there wasn't a football in that school. He came to me. He's like, Steven, why are you wearing your winter clothes? And I looked around, and him and all of his friends are decked out in their new pastel, spring colors. And all of a sudden, everybody starts cracking up, and I felt, so ridiculed and diminished that and then fast forward a couple more years, actually many more years, I'm a Domino delivery driver, delivering pizzas on Super Bowl Sunday. And I ring the doorbell, and I have a whole bunch of pies and sodas with me. And who opens the door? The same exact person. So here I am, humiliated again by the same person, and I hear all of his cronies in the back watching the game. So the psychological element to that is, I think somehow my brain said, you're never going to be at the bottom of the totem pole again. Whatever you do, you have to rise above where they perceive you to be, which is like serving them pizza and wearing last season's clothes. So I think my mind programmed itself to say, you're going to rise above the rest and be successful.
I think wherever you find your motivation, it's right. And man, kids are mean, as that's the other takeaway from that. And hopefully he was a nicer adult than he was a kid, quite frankly. But yeah, it's, for me, it was the risk of failure, but
Mm-hmm.
I can relate in so many ways. In kind of just talking about your role today, there's probably a series of things that you assess and find with your typical customer, but talk a little bit about your work today. I think you talked about what gives you joy or why you do it, but talk about your work today and the impact it has.
Sure. So yeah, so there's definitely a methodology. I mean, no two companies are the same. Everybody, folks that I work with, come to me with different types of challenges. But one thing that I find very common across the board is management teams and leadership teams. And a company is really only as good as its leadership team, because they're the ones that are tasked with obviously the leadership and management of the company to get it to the next level. I find that, especially working with companies that have been around for a while, that there's a lot of people in leadership positions, just because they've been there from day one. And they become really friendly with the CEO. They've almost become like family. And the CEO has a really hard time upgrading that position. And it's of no fault to the individual that's in that role. It's just he or she has just never been at a company at that level before. And it's both unfair to the individual, and it's unfair to the company and to the CEO. So, one of my biggest pieces of advice is really to take a look at the leadership team and the management team, and just to make sure that you have the right players in the right positions in order to bring a company to the next level. And on the hiring front, my advice is always, let's just pick a number. If you're at a $10 million in sales and you're looking for a new head of sales, don't hire a head of sales that has experience running a $10 million organization. Hire a head of sales that has experience running a $20 million or organization, because he or she is going to easily be able to take what you currently have and bring it up to the next level. And whereas somebody that doesn't have that experience is going to struggle. So always hire a couple of clubs higher than you normally would, is my advice.
I love your story and impact on the management team. I certainly, as I was getting going, was collecting interesting people on that team, folks that might not even have viewed themselves as leaders, even though they were in a leadership team. They certainly were more technical experts or kind of just grew up with me. And it takes a lot to make those changes and get it right. Do you also focus on the team dynamic of the teams themselves as much as getting the right people in the seat, or do you leave that up to the president or CEO of the business for the health of the team?
No, the dynamic is really important. We've gone through a lot of different exercises, over the many years of my company, Myers-Briggs and, similar type tests.
Sure.
It's really important. And like the 7 dysfunctions of a team, I love that exercise. Patrick of Lucioni, I think, Lencioni.
Lencioni, absolutely.
Yeah, those exercises I think are incredibly important to do, because you want to make sure that whatever boxes you define that are important, the idea generator, the executor, the communicator, the relationship builder. I mean, you need those ingredients. If your entire team is in one area, you're not going to get anywhere. If you have nothing but relationship builders, nobody's going to execute on any of the ideas, because you don't have an idea builder. So every quadrant is really important to be filled in.
Oh, so many painful lessons learned in all of that, Stephen. And I think it makes Stephen an expert, because you have to do it and live through it and try all those exercises and see some of them go so amazingly well and others just flop so poorly.
Exactly. And right now, I mean, there's so many things. Like right now, I'm having this conversation with you, and I guarantee you my phone is going to serve up, 5 different Myers-Briggs, competitors to me. You know, So some of them really work, and some of them don't. So it's really important to pick out the ones that other folks have had success with.
So obviously, audience, we plan questions. So I want to warn Stephen that this is an unplanned question. Um, but I think it's important. It seems like you really have worked hard to know who you are, really know who you are, and that's helped. Was that a part of your journey in building a business and being a founder and those things? And along that way, that the hard thing is we don't often really know who the heck we are, and you learn it through journeys like this.
Oh, this is probably the only way to really, you have to go through the journey to really experience it and to learn. I mean, I figured out a lot of things about myself. I figured out that, I probably stayed hands-on much longer than I should have. Had I been more, I could have worked, on the business more than in the business. And I remained as hands-on as my company would let me. Obviously, they stopped letting me code, but they didn't stop letting me go onto projects and be like a project manager or an executive sponsor on projects. So I really enjoyed, being on site. I just love the interaction with customers, and I loved seeing the success that our products and services were creating for customers. So I just learned that I personally, at the time, enjoyed being more hands-on than in the boardroom. And later on, as my career evolved, that is when I started realizing how much value I would add in the boardroom versus on the court. So, like later on in my professional career, I actually promoted myself to executive chairman, and I brought on a CEO to run the day-to-day activities of the company, because I felt that I'd be doing a better job as an executive chairman, running 100, only focusing 100% on the business while letting everybody else operate in the business all day.
And I think unless you try on each of those roles along the way, coder, promoter, project lead, inserting themselves everywhere, and then strategist in the boardroom. I mean, I think it's hard to grasp that evolution. I know for me, I had a similar pattern, not quite at the chairmanship yet, but for me, it's like I was really good at the promotion, and I wasn't sure I was going to be really good at the strategist. So I stayed there, because it was comfortable and knew I was adding value. I think there's just proof that there's risk. So your business goes through phases, requires different things. There's a great book called The Second Decision. Your first decision is to be founder. Your second decision is to be CEO of that business. But I think there's more decisions than two, quite frankly.
Oh, 100%. There's many decisions, and for every CEO out there that is thinking that there's nobody on this planet that can run this baby better than I can, my advice is you're wrong. Those individuals are out there. From a staffing perspective, I'm not belittling how easy it's going to be to find that individual, but that individual is out there, and when you find them, it's going to be a blessing. In my specific case, you don't need to jump into that pool right away either. And the route I went was, I decided that I wanted to get a CEO eventually, so I started with hiring a COO. So I hired this gentleman as a COO, and I was going to give him a year to see how happy I was with him in that position. And it only took me 3 months to figure out that he'd be the best, a better CEO than I would. So that year-long experiment was condensed into 3 months, and then I got my promotion, he got his, and I did more Ironman races.
Well, the vulnerability in that is fantastic, because I mean, that's you tried something and learned something, and it takes such grit and balls to start a business and get it to a point. And I think it took more to make that decision, even though you knew it was right. More of the life you want versus I don't know if any of us wants the life of birthing a company. We survive it. I can't look
It's
back on it and say I want to do that again. I don't think anyway. And you only have the energy for it once or twice, that whole bootstrapping thing. But
true.
I knew we had that connection from the first time we were talking. So, knowing that people listen to this are like at crossroads in their life and career, any difficult moments of your career you want to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, we again, building a company totally bootstrapped. We had a ton of challenges. Cash flow was always a challenge, especially in the early days. Before you have a real credit line, the amount of sleep I've lost over not being able to make payroll is countless.
Even can you imagine? I mean, I say all the time, like, how did we make it? We had no value proposition. We had no, like, there was so much risk of everything. And it,
Yeah, there was a ton of risk, but somehow, some way, never missed a payroll. Made every single one of them, even though some of them were literally down to the hour. So there was challenges with cash flow, of course. There was definitely challenges with people. I am I established really good relationships with most of the folks that worked for me. And when it came time to make a really hard decision, I mean, those kept me up at night. Most leaders, most founders are guilty of waiting way too long when they know in their heart that a certain individual just needs to go. They wait
such good
way too
advice.
long in order to make that move. And when they do, like, oh my God, what took me so long? This happens 100% of the time. Unless you're an experienced CEO, you've been there, done that, then you've learned your lessons. But that was always tough. Pivoting when technology was changing, like in the 90s, early 2000s, the vast majority of our revenue came from IBM. We had an incredible relationship with IBM executives, and then the technology tide started turning, and we needed to adopt the Microsoft platform. And obviously, Microsoft to IBM was the evil empire. And from a business perspective, we had no choice but to pivot. But that meant all of these relationships were going to be hurt. And I'll never forget this meeting where I went to Westchester, where IBM was headquartered, and they saw how felt I bad about the news I was delivering about our new relationship with Microsoft. And they said, Steven, relax. Every relationship has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If this relationship is at an end, we get it. And so I'm like, thank you for letting me off the hook.
Well, it's another lesson. And, I think I always thought business would be bad when it was bad, Stephen. And I always thought business would always be good when it was good. I,
Right.
you know what I mean? Oh, it's just going to keep happening. And it's hard, even though you know better. My learns.
Yeah.
How do you keep learning today? What are your habits there?
I love learning. I train a lot for a lot of my adventures. So I'm running and biking, countless hours every single week. So I always have an audiobook on. So I'm
Okay.
always listening to something, whether it's, self-help, whether it's how to, whether most of the time it's not sports related because I'm actually doing a sport. I don't need to be listening about the sport. And sometimes I just pick up completely random titles, and I really really enjoy, like, totally like, I think last month I picked up on, like, how to be a stand-up comic. I have no intention of ever being a stand-up comic, but I'm fascinated by other trades. I read a book on cattle ranching, or I'm sorry, listened to a book on cattle ranching. I have no intention of ever getting a farm or ranching cattle, but just a totally random topic is fascinating. And guess what? It helps a 100-mile bike ride go by a lot quicker.
And it broadens your perspective and makes you a great dinner party guest too, I think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
One thing remind me to show you, but I'm in a couple of book clubs that are electronic with other big readers, and it's really interesting because you see what other people are reading and you get their recommendations, and it's neat that it's online. So we started one with our company, and I pay people to read, and that's been kind of a neat thing because I also big book fan in the spirit of where you are with things. So I think it's terrific. So obviously you're taking care of yourself. There is a lot of discussion and thoughts and blogs and articles about, your morning routine and that kind of stuff. I know that you tortured yourself with business in the early stages, but how are you recovering today with taking care of yourself?
Um, just the standard stuff, nothing earth shattering. I eat as healthy as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So that helps tremendously. Obviously, I work out a ton. I think my biggest life hack that I've taken on is I recently read a book, the Wim, which is pretty popular these days, the Wim Hof method.
Yeah.
It basically teaches a variety of breathing techniques as well as cold water immersion. I've become a huge fan of that, and I actually do feel a difference. Like I don't remember the last time I took a hot shower. I only take cold showers. It just makes a big it's scientifically proven to make a huge physiological difference in your body, in your day, in your mental attitude for the day. So cold
Do,
showers is cold showers and a and a good diet with a ton of exercise is how I take care of myself these days.
do the cold showers help with recovery? I'm out of my league
100%.
on this one, but I feel like they might.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the reason like athletes take these, ice baths, after every single game, it helps with muscle recovery tremendously.
If you could give advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Invest in real estate. And again, we came from like an immigrant mentality, right? There was always, keeping up with, coming to a new country where there was so much opportunity. It was unfortunately, I saw a lot of, keeping up with the Joneses, and I had some of that in my early life. I definitely would have traded, attempting to keep up with the Joneses to to real estate investment. And we also had kids really young. So I was 22 when we had our first child. So my advice would be get your kids into the outdoors much more. I have, fantastic children. I love them to death, but they will never go camping. They'll never go mountaineering. They can't stand
Well,
bugs. So
maybe they will because you did, so the real estate comment, is that a rich dad poor dad comment that, you know, some people
yeah.
buy furs for their wife, some people buy an apartment complex, right? It's buy assets, or is it more of not run a business with as many people?
It's a combination of both. It's more rich dad,
Yeah.
poor dad. It's, buy assets and especially, buy revenue producing assets. One of the great examples I heard recently, and it's going to drive me crazy that I don't remember the name of the book because he gives
I'll
an
tell you what,
example
we'll put it, say, give your story, but we'll put it in the show notes.
okay,
Okay.
perfect. Perfect. The example he gives, the way he taught his children on how to appreciate, buying assets was he gave his daughter an allowance. So after she saved up, instead of spending the money on dolls, which is what she used to do, he goes, "Why don't you save up your allowance and then buy this toaster from me?" She's like, "What do you mean?" "Buy the toaster from me, and every time I use it, I'm going to pay you for the use of this toaster." She's like, "That's a silly idea." But after, a couple of times of trying this, he finally convinced her. And then she realized that owning something that somebody else is going to pay for is a wonderful thing. And then her little piggy bank kept increasing in size. And then he did the same thing with the refrigerator. He did it with the microwave. So by the time she was 7 years old, she owned all the appliances in the kitchen and she was being paid, for their use. So she's barely 12 and she already has real estate.
That's a heck of a story. And, please, let me know the book title because it's not one I'm familiar with, but I'm going to read it the second I get it.
Yeah,
Um, we all could use a dose of that. And it's hard to imagine because, cars need brakes and kids get sick and we,
exactly.
need to buy fridges, but that's the only real way to get ahead, I perceive. So
Yes.
you're a smart man, experienced man. What other things do you feel like we want to weave into the dialogue that I haven't touched on?
I mean, we talked about a whole, broad variety of things. Um, and one thing that I also advise everybody on is just having fun and laughing. I mean, I truly believe, I mean, this is also scientifically proven, a lot of the, communities out there that, live, past 100, I think they're, what are they called? Not the blue zones or I forget the name for it. There's a
I
name
think
for it.
that's right. Isn't that the blue zones where,
It could be the blue
yeah,
zones.
I think you got it right.
Right. So one of the many ingredients to their longevity is the fact that they have a lot of friends and they have a lot of great relationships and that they laugh a lot. I think laughing is fantastic and having fun needs to be a priority in people's lives. And I mean, I'm all for working hard. Trust me, I've proven that I can work around the clock. I can definitely race around the clock. I've proven that as well. But, laughing around the clock is what really, adds a lot of years, which I believe in. And I also think spirituality. Even though I went to a Hebrew school growing up, it was always my spirituality was left at school. And when I came home, we really weren't super, practicing Jews. I mean, we celebrated the high holidays and all, but nothing, uber religious. Ever since my father passed, I got reacquainted with my rabbi, and I reintroduced, spirituality into my life. And I feel that gives me a big boost in the morning. So after my cold shower in the morning, 5 to 10 minutes of prayer really sets me up for success for the day. So I'm a big fan of that.
Steven, I think that is a really, really strong addition to what we've been talking about. If you ever been a bootstrapped entrepreneur, it's hard to find joy. It gets mind numbing,
Yes.
and it may seem as if we're exaggerating the point about happy, but it is a choice. And your spirituality comment hits just at the right time for a lot of us. Coming off the pandemic, it's just hard not to think that way, and not to have something like that to count on each day. So I think that's just terrific. What's your next big race?
Next big
Speaking
race.
of happy, what's the next big or mountain you're climbing?
So I have a little bit of unfinished business. So actually, the next three in a row, the three big ones, is the only Ironman I never finished because I dropped out in the middle of it was Ironman Cozumel. So I'm
Okay.
signed up for Ironman Cozumel. There was also a crazy triathlon that I attempted earlier this year, which I did not finish, which I'll do again. It's called Ultraman.
Yeah.
The distances sound ridiculous. It's a 3-day triathlon. The first day is a 6.5 mile swim, followed by a 90-mile bike. The second day is a 170-mile bike, and the third day is a 52-mile run.
You
I
are twisted, my friend.
I wrote a big blog post about the details. I did most of the pieces, but I didn't finish every piece. Therefore, it's considered a DNF, did not finish. So in my mind, that's unfinished business. And I attempted to summit Denali in Alaska twice. Yeah, twice. And unsuccessfully, due to weather, due to various conditions, and some of the conditions being myself and lack of proper training as well. So that's in my book. That's unfinished business. So the three big things coming up in the next 12 months are those three, with a whole bunch of smaller, easier races in between.
So, Steven, I think you'll know what I'm going to talk about. We'll wrap on this if it makes sense. But I wrote a blog post many years ago talking about the McKinley effect. McKinley is Denali, but
Same thing.
McKinley being, do you have enough left in the tank to go at over 100% capacity to save your life? So I've always wanted to do Denali, Rainier, lots of other 14,000 footers, but never that one. And I give you credit. And I think, is that 2 weeks to get to the approach? Is that right? Or is it 3 weeks to get to the?
The entire trip is 3 weeks.
That's what I
So
thought. Yeah.
it takes just over 2 weeks. It's almost 3 weeks up and 2 days down. That's
Oh,
that's how much
that's amazing.
acclimatization you need to do on the way up, and then just race down, because with every single air there's more, with every single step down there's more oxygen in the air, so you literally go faster and faster and faster and faster as you go down.
Well,
So
Steven, if you're willing, as you finish that insane 4 days or Denali, I'd love to have you back just to talk about the physical and mental journey of one of those.
happy to. I love doing it, and I love talking about doing it after I'm done.
Yeah. We share that in common, and I haven't done as much as that, but my 60 miles on the AT is my version of that at this point, but
Hey, that's a huge accomplishment right there and then. So congratulations on that. That's on my bucket list.
Any last advice for 63,000 people that are hanging on your every word?
If you have an idea, if you have something interesting that you're thinking about, whether it's a career change or a new product idea that you want to potentially try your entrepreneurship on, I'd say, stop waiting and go for it. Life is too short. So if there's an opportunity to go do something interesting, don't hesitate.
So what we'll do is in the body of this, when it's released, we'll list your book title, if that's
Cool.
okay. So
Sure.
that, a little bit of a call to action here. So we'll list Steven's that and maybe some of the races and then the book that you referenced about selling
Sure.
toasters and refrigerators.
Yep.
And if you're listening to this and you need help thinking through some of this stuff, just a reminder that my company Placers is there to assist you. If you need hands-on help with career, or if you're thinking about your next move, or just need some tools or techniques to figure out what you want to do next. But Steven, thank you for being a great guest.
It's been totally great, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.